Let's be honest. Tampering is and will always be an issue in sports. And now, with the freedom of the transfer portal mixed with NIL in college athletics, it's at an all-time high. Coaches like Kirby Smart and others have said as much. And while there's no way to keep people and players from using third parties or past connections to gauge interest or pursue other players, there is one way I think you can at least combat it. That way is by having players sign contracts with said school if they are receiving NIL money. And these contracts state that in order to receive the full amount of the NIL payments, the player must stay a certain amount of years at the school they're receiving the NIL from. If that player breaches the contract or decides to leave before that term is up, they must repay either all or a percentage of the NIL money they have received. I've said on many occasions, I have no problem with players being able to leave in most instances. But those paying these players the extra money should have some protections. Now, I get that for this to really go into effect and become a reality, a school would have to be the first to implement it and jump in, and it could hurt recruiting initially. But if the right school with enough sway does pull the trigger on this, I do think you would see a domino effect pretty quickly after. It would cause players to think twice before seeking out or going about leaving in a nefarious way. Now, since the geniuses who run college athletics decided to open up multiple Pandora's boxes at once with no guardrails and NIL and the transfer portal, this would be a way around trying to get rules put in place federally or by means that would end up with more antitrust lawsuits than you could count. Now, as I've also stated on multiple occasions, I am glad that players can get paid for their name, image, and likeness. I do the same thing. But if you're going to get into the business of business, you have to understand it is a two-way street. And eventually, the people pumping the money into these individuals or collectives are going to want guarantees. After all, they're fans of that school. Now, that doesn't just mean football either. We've seen college basketball become a carousel that never stops. And this could add some much-needed continuity to teams who are having to replace whole rosters year in and year out. It's a pretty clean fix. And while you will never stop tampering, at least this may tamp it down somewhat. I'm going to bring in my co-hosts, David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback, and my brother, repping the nice brown jacket. Again, I'm loving the get up today. I don't want to make it weird. I don't want to make it weird. It's a good color blue. It reminds me of the old.
I would like to make it weird.
It's the Ole Miss powder blue look. That's like
you can't beat that.
You can't beat it.
Well, I always think like it's never weird until you say I'm not trying to make it weird.
Yeah, but right? I can see the look in your face.
It's like that comment. It's like when you say it's like, look, I'm not trying to be mean.
Yeah.
But then follows up by something that's going to be mean.
Yeah, with all due respect. Yes, and then you say something unbelievably disrespectful.
Exactly.
But David, I do want to start with you. We've talked about NIL. We've talked about the transfer portal. We've talked about all these things happening at once, the COVID year and the extra time that you get. But at some point, on the other side of players, which they should be receiving these NIL payments, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the collectives. I thought NIL was, if Bryce Young wants to do a Dr. Pepper commercial, Bryce Young's people talks to Dr. Pepper's people, and they work it out without a middleman, but we've lost that with the collectives. But don't you think this could somewhat clean it up a little bit, or maybe make it more kind of straight-laced?
How do we not have contracts? What, 18-year-olds are old enough to become multimillionaires by playing college football, but they're not old enough to honor their commitments and sign contracts? See, this is the powers that be in college football were so concerned in the other rooms with signing the TV deals, they haven't been watching the product. Yeah. Now the product, like you and I were talking about this past season, the product on the field is going to be good for a while. No matter what, it's going to take time for it just to constantly decay, but that's what it will do unless you pay attention to it. And we talk to people all the time that's like, college sports is going the wrong direction for me, and I've been a lifelong fan. We hear from those types of people all the time. Yeah, look, Jalen Hurts can call his old buddy Derrick Henry and say, hey, you know what? You should come play running back this next season for the Philadelphia Eagles because the Titans aren't going to win anything. But what keeps him from doing that? What keeps that from being labeled tampering? Well, the guys sign contracts, right? In the NFL, we're the same way. We have a contract here. You can't just go the next day, go work for someone else. Like that's how these things work. So these kids, they have to be able to figure it out. Now, on your point of, it's going to take one school to come up and maybe get hit in recruiting first, it shouldn't be on individual schools. That's why we need the leaders of the governing bodies. It's like in the NFL, you wouldn't expect just one team like the Dallas Cowboys to say, you know what, we should institute a salary cap. No, they'd get destroyed. Who would want to go play there? You'd go play for all the other NFL teams. It takes the entire body and the entity to say, no, we're going to institute a salary cap because that's going to be more egalitarian for the league.
Yeah, and in a perfect world and the best way possible, yes, there would just be some blanket rule. But I feel like if NIL was all right, here's the deal for every school, it's even this way, here are the rules, here's the way it's going to work, then that could be done. With the different collectives and different schools making money, I mean, you have schools coming out now basically saying, look, it's money laundering. It is. That's really what it is. It's so disorganized, I don't think there could be a blanket rule because there's so many different hands and so many different pots, and it's different at Texas A&M than it is at Louisville. And I think now, Blaine, and this is something we've mentioned, it got to the point when all this got let go that the people on the other end were so afraid of looking not like bigots, but like they weren't for the players or worried about, looking bad or being, the big bad corporation, that they were afraid to make any moves. And we've had people in the political world come on here and say federally, I mean, there's not much we can do because once you let that bad boy out of the bag, there's no putting it back in. But if a Georgia or a school where, I'm just using that as an example, that players understand if they go there, it is an avenue to go make a ton of money in the NFL. Were to implement this, I think others would fall in line very, very quickly, but it would have to start at the top, right?
Well, I just don't know how I don't know how they would do it. I mean, if you go from state to state, every state's going to be different. If they do a blanket law, everybody, the amount of money each school has is going to be different. And recruiting is about what? Recruiting is about image. That's what, if you're a kid, right, and one school did it, why would you ever want to go to that school? Like it's a lose-lose for you. So they'll never get it done. I mean, should it be contract based? 100%. There's no reason it shouldn't be because, I mean, if anything, it's just a free way to get out anything you want. But they're not going to do it because it's about image, money they can't cover, and 3, state laws which won't come down and do the right thing. So football now, what do you always say? They're building the parachute on the way down. Hell, I don't even know if they're building the parachute. There's going to throw money at these kids.
Hoping to land.
Yeah, they're just going to throw
Mr.
as much
Potato
money
Head
at these kids as they can and hope and pray and put all their trust in an 18-year-old kid who's making $500,000 that he's going to get enough snaps and it's going to go right for him enough this year for him to stay at their school.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it in its most base form, here's what you did. You said, hey, we'll pay you money while you're playing at this school for your name, image, and likeness. And also, you can leave whenever you want. Like you did both of those. Like you don't have to be a business major to realize that that's going to create some problems. So maybe it's through the businesses, right? I don't think the collectives are going to do it. And we got buddies that are in collectives. I understand. People going to get their bag, go get your bag. That's why I never get mad at people when people say, oh, well, you took advantage of the tax laws, so you didn't have to pay as much taxes. Well, yeah. That's just using common sense. If you're going to give me rules in sports that I can push the envelope in some like fake injuries and stuff like that, if it's going to help me win, I am going to do that. So I will never get mad at someone for going to get their bag in that way. But you literally did the 2 worst things you could do for trying to get somebody to stay by paying them, and then just let them say, hey, you know what?
That's what I'm saying. They didn't think it would matter.
Yeah,
they're signing the TV deals. And it was like you get called exploitative enough, and you're like, well, what can we do to make sure that we're not exploiting anyone?
Then you get exploited.
But to the point,
that's the funniest thing.
But to the point of this could never happen because there's all these different states and there's so many different teams and there's no overarching, because the NCAA is basically non-existent anymore. That is true, and it's not necessarily a bad thing either because it is in this sense that it's hard to like implement a rule for every single team to follow. That's where this is a negative. But one of the reasons we all like college sports so much is because it is more local and regional.
Yeah.
You don't have this like big badge that MLB or the NFL over that can just make these overarching rules and say every team has to do this by tomorrow, including like wear a pride flag or something because one of our sponsors wants it, right? Well, you can't do that with 130 or more different local and regional schools, which is one of the great things about college athletics. But when you're trying to institute a couple rules to make a fair playing field, that's what makes it tough, because now at SEC Spring Media Days, they're down there talking about, this state's instituting laws to get an edge up on Alabama. Like it's going to the legislature of states.
That's how much it
so that they can be Auburn and be out. And it's, look, the free market, like I'm always have as few rules as possible, right? Because you start to add more and more, it gets convoluted in whatever situation you're talking about. Let the free market do its thing. But like you said, if we're going to have a level playing field within a conference, or even more importantly, I think within a country for college athletics, we have to agree on something.
For sure.
Right?
It's just like any negotiation, right? There's got to be some sort of compromise on both ends, or you're never. I think that's one of the biggest problems we have right now in the country is nobody is willing to budge on anything, so nothing can ever get done.
It's hard to get a lot of coaches in a room and get them to compromise with each other.
That's what Drinkowitz
it's a stalemate.
said, right? Which we'll get to Drinkowitz.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Let us know too in the comments. Do you think players should have contracts as we're talking about? I think it's a fascinating conversation. Hey, YouTube, appreciate you guys checking us out. If you don't know, we do a live show each weekday morning from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern. That's 6:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. Central. Come check us out. We have a live chat. We do live call-ins on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We have great guests, and we cover every sport. And also, it'll kind of remind you of the way you used to watch sports shows when you were growing up. Not this crazy wacko stuff that you get now. So make sure you subscribe.